So yesterday, we briefly touched on this story about the Austin Bills. As a refresh, allow me to read this news clipping to you. So the Austin Bills might sound odd, but it could be a possibility. Citing an unnamed ownership source, Seth Wickersham of ESPN reported that Austin, Texas, could be a potential city that the Bills would consider moving to if they don't get a new stadium in New York. The Bills' contract with their current home, Orchard Park, is up in 2023. So that could be a big year of movement for football in general, because we're looking at a potential college football playoff expansion in 2023. And possibly, this is probably just a leverage move, but it's still a possibility. And we've seen this play out before where a team says, I want a new stadium.
Yep.
You've got to help me build it. Likely you want to get some tax money in there so that the owner doesn't have to pony up. It's like, hey, I'm providing you with an NFL team so you can pay for the stadium, and then you can also pay for the tickets within that stadium and the concessions. But there are other cities elsewhere that have a desire for an NFL franchise that would pay handsomely for it, is what Wickersham also reportedly had heard from this ownership source. So, with that said, no disrespect to the great city of Austin, I have legitimately only heard amazing things about that city. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say a negative word about Austin. It's one of those up-and-coming cities in this country. Although at this point, I think we've been saying that for 10 years, so maybe we're past the up-and-coming stage, the development stage of Austin, and we're just into just sheer success. But either way, we have decided on this show that Austin is not the place for an NFL team.
They are not the place at all. Like, come on, Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like NFL city to me. It doesn't feel like that spot that we're going to drop, especially the Bills. You got to do better than that.
So we have these discussions all the time in this city. This is one of those, because we're hungry for a lot of these other pro sports to walk through the door. We have this conversation often. It's one of the low-hanging fruit of sports talk radio in Orlando, Florida. When we have these conversations, we're talking about Major League Baseball. We talk about NHL. Very rarely do we really get into the NFL conversation. I think because there's this sort of fear that, well, there's the Bucks, and then there's Jacksonville, and there's the Dolphins, and we're a big college football city, so there's just no way that would ever work, and you just breeze by it.
That's usually what the argument is. Even the argument that I make often is just, they're just not going to put another team in this state now. But if they're going to put one in Austin, they might as well put one in Florida.
I mean, there's already multiple teams in Texas, and I mean, whatever. Like, I'm not going to get into that whole thing, because I'm firmly in the camp of, it doesn't matter that there's a team in Jacksonville. People live in Orlando, a lot of them millions, and they would populate an NFL stadium. But we can argue about how we're going to put the stadium in Lake Nona some other time. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to eliminate international travel from this discussion as we try and find a better host city for the Buffalo Bills rather than Austin, Texas. London would be a great spot. Clearly, the NFL is interested in that market. They take a team there, multiple teams every single year. But there's just too many hoops to jump through, because that's going to be a tough sell for players to go, hey, every road game you've got to fly across the Atlantic Ocean. And especially if we never get rid of COVID, you can forget this.
Oh, without doubt, yeah.
So a couple of options that are obvious and to me yawn-worthy would be St. Louis, San Diego, Oakland. You all had your chance and you failed. Sorry. Salt Lake City. That's a great place, and it's a good sports market. The Utah Jazz are well supported, and San Antonio is another one of them that you often hear about. So that was literally just Googling future NFL cities, and that's the list that pops up.
And I don't want to hear that list, because you're absolutely right. Oakland's had multiple chances. It's just not going to work. St. Louis has had multiple chances, and it's just not going to work. San Antonio, maybe I can smell a little San Antonio, but I'm not sold on that either. And Salt Lake City, come on now. Just don't waste my time. Seriously.
So can I give you my list of better options?
This
is from my brain and my brain alone.
All right, what you got?
Number one, Orlando, because obviously. Okay, so
and for the record, let's put out there that is not because you guys are in Orlando kind of take. We've watched people in this city. We've watched how they flock to football in this town, and Orlando is a place where football will actually work. Not only that, you have the opportunity to have 4 teams in the state which instantly builds rivalries between those 4 teams, especially if you put them in alternating divisions and conferences and so on and so forth. It would be an absolute blast. You could actually have a Florida division, just call it a wash.
Yeah, I love that idea. If California has 3 teams, we can have 4 because we like football more than California does.
Absolutely.
That's the math. Tuscaloosa is on my list. Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And I'm going to go, oh, that's not a glamour market. There's plenty of markets in the NFL that aren't glamorous. I give you
are.
Buffalo and Green Bay. So not every city needs to be on the top 15 list at Nielsen.com, which I know Stefan is looking at
right now
as we speak. So they've earned it. They have absolutely crushed the college football world. So Tuscaloosa, you're on my list. How about this one? Anchorage, Alaska. We completely forget about Alaska on a regular basis. And I love a good snow game. We would get them constantly with Anchorage, Alaska.
So I understand that is a sarcastic pick, because if you're not going to London, you're definitely not going to Anchorage, Alaska. It is the same distance away.
But it's connected.
You're traveling from New York to Anchorage. So the Jets have a game in Anchorage, and you're just going to fly up there on a Friday night and be ready for Sunday morning's game? That's what we're doing?
It's connected to North America, unlike London.
Okay. I'll give you it's connected. Right.
Omaha, Nebraska, because it's already part of the football vernacular.
No.
Omaha.
No.
Okay.
No.
And my 5th one is Portland, because I ran out of good ideas.
So I have a city that I think would be a good spot for a team that I don't think you mentioned. I know you didn't mention Louisville, Kentucky. I think you can put a team in Louisville, Kentucky, and I am looking at the list. I think you can put a team in Louisville, Kentucky, and they can be a viable addition to the NFL. And it builds rivalry. You've got that area there between Tennessee, then Louisville, then Carolina. So you've got some rivalry team there to kind of look at and play around with. I agree that Alabama may be a good place to put a team. I don't know that Tuscaloosa is the place to put the team. Huntsville, maybe Birmingham, because they're actual cities in the state. So we could do something there. And then I would say outside of that, I don't see another real place, because I've looked at the list.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of market. Yeah, there's not a lot of places that you're going to be sticking teams at. You're talking about Norfolk, Virginia, Albuquerque, maybe right. If you really just wanted to stick a team in New Mexico. Outside of that, Richmond, Virginia, no, that's not happening.
All the more reason why Orlando eventually, I can't tell you when, I cannot tell you how, but eventually Orlando will have an NFL team. Because this is your alternative.
Yeah, you're talking about Roanoke. You're talking about Tulsa. You're talking about Columbia, South Carolina. You're talking about Shreveport, Syracuse, Chattanooga, Savannah, Baton Rouge, Boise, Reno, Nevada. Like these places, Fort Myers, these places are not getting NFL teams, and this is what the major market list looks like.
There is a lot of space in the Mountain West for another football team, but the problem is that nobody lives out there.
Exactly.
It's a gorgeous landscape with no people.
Yeah,
you're not going to put a team there.
You're not. Between Montana, Idaho, North Dakota, South Dakota, Oklahoma, Nebraska, Kansas, there's nothing there except for Kansas City.
You know what?
That's all you need.
Well, you know what I'd be really entertained by is if Milwaukee got him. And you think, well, Wisconsin, Green Bay, this 3-hour drive from Milwaukee to Green Bay. So that's Miami to Orlando. That's saying you can't have a team in Orlando because there's a team in Miami. That's ridiculous. That's the same thing. Now, I'm sure that everybody in Milwaukee, for the most part, is a Packer fan. But if they made that city split their allegiance, that would be really entertaining to watch. And there are a lot of people that live in Milwaukee. I bet they're towards the top of that list that you're looking at.
You're absolutely